Welcome to the Midlife Midsters podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most of midlife.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy to see you all today for our recording. When we were talking about topics for our podcasts, and it just got me thinking about why we're doing this and how much I enjoy doing it. And I really thought about, I love doing these podcasts, not just because we're all together, which is such a treat, but because in many ways it forces or encourages me to take some time out of my daily life and think deeply about some things. And so thinking about what's in a toolkit, what's in a toolbox, what's in your quiver. I saw somebody talked about arrows in your quiver. Not necessarily screwdrivers and hammers in your toolbox, but what are the things that we go to? What are the things that we need as we traverse our lives? And as I was coming up with this, and maybe just before we start talking about what we each have in our singular or multiple toolboxes, I started thinking I might need a suitcase, but I came across something. I'm going to just read it because I forgot to print it out. But it's called Life is Amazing. And I think it's so relevant to what we're all going through at different points in our lives. But again, when we go back to our toolkits. So life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living, heartbreaking, soul-healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful.
I love that.
And I just found this so relevant to the concept of our toolkits because for me, my toolkit is an emotional one. There's a beauty toolkit, and there's a physical toolkit and a health toolkit, and then there might be a toolkit that has each of these different things in it. And I thought maybe we could start by going around and maybe throwing out not everything in our toolkit, but maybe starting with one of the first things that you go to when you're in need of your toolkit, right? It's not something that every day you're walking around with your toolkit and saying, what do I need to pull out? But at times of introspection, when life gets to be a little less ordinary, and I don't know that our lives are so mundane, but maybe routine, right? And that's a nice thing. But
At times it is routine.
Routine, but not mundane.
Yeah,
I didn't like that word mundane, but I didn't write the piece. So let's just start out with, and we'll go around and we can all introduce ourselves as we go around. And, what's in your toolkit? What's in your wallet?
Besides bourbon and cigarettes?
If that's in your toolkit, go for it. That's
Depends
right.
on the day.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. I don't have my champagne toolkit.
I think my toolkit in this stage of life is maybe a little different. It's not as sort of an esoteric collection of emotional states, or it's really more pragmatic things that I have found over time that I need. So just to throw out one, and this was on the list we kind of circulated earlier, I think it's really important that I have finally found a doctor that I trust. Because as I skirted through my 50s, things were great. I hit 60 and I had like some serious bumps in the road. I went in for my first physical at 60 and there were all these problems that had never manifested before. And I actually had a doctor at that time that I was not confident with because his answer to everything was, well, you're postmenopause. Marianne hooked me up with a wonderful woman doctor who has helped me navigate all of these things that were bumps in the road, and now the path is smooth again. So I think it's actually really important for me to know that I have my health under control, because that's something that scares me about getting older. To allay the fear factor, it's important to me to know that I have good health care and someone I can trust.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Leslie Ann. Yeah, that's really good.
So, okay, my toolbox, I'm going to talk about maybe the emotional side of the toolbox. So the first thing I think, and it's been with me throughout my life, but I think it's stronger now, is a positive mindset. And I know that sounds so cliche because people talk about that all the time, but I've just felt if I can look at things in a positive way, reframe it in my head, no matter what I'm going to be hit with, I'm in a good state to begin with. So I feel like I'm hitting it with some clarity, positive mind. I can assess things from a better place than if I wasn't in a positive mindset. And I know that there are times that maybe I'm not as positive as, because things get you down, but I always try to come from that point first. So that's probably not my number one tool in my toolkit.
Well, and that's what we were saying. You go to your toolkit to give yourself that resilience, to bounce back, to not be afraid of what might be coming. You have those resources.
And I would think that also, like, my getting a positive mindset is, having love, kindness, respect. I mean, all those things help me be positive. We were just talking earlier about putting boundaries in place to protect kind of your energy, your aura, all of that as well. So a lot goes into the positive mindset. So it's not just waking up, being positive. It's definitely curating a lot of things in your life to get you to that spot.
I was going to say, you probably have an entire toolkit
for that
getting the positive.
That would be true. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Carmen?
I'd break mine down into 3 areas. There's kind of the physical stuff, the intellectual stuff, and then the emotional stuff. So the physical exercise has always been super important to me. And I find in midlife, it's important to me for different reasons than it was as a kid or in my 20s. It's important to keep my health, but also to relieve stress and to feel good about myself and to keep in shape and all of those things. I think emotionally, I've had a very, very trying year, but with a lot of breakthroughs. And I think emotionally, one of the things that's become evident is that my friends have become, like, I've always been close to my friends. Middle age, midlife, it's on a whole different level. And that has been, I recently went through something very significant that I won't go into detail about, but I opened myself up to some friends in a way that I never had before. And actually my husband too, but I think my friends were really relevant here. People that I'd known longer than I had known my husband. And about something extremely personal and really difficult that they didn't know. And they've known me, some of them, for 40 years. And was pleasantly shocked by the love and the acceptance that I received. And that, for me, I was like, wow, this is a toolkit I need to continue. I mean, I think I had invested a lot over 30 years in some of these friendships, but I hadn't really called on them in this way. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And then I think the sort of mental intellectual is that you just have a lot more perspective once you get to this age. So, bad things happen. People die. People get sick. Parents get sick. I think at this age, there is an ability to realize you will get through it. Whereas, in your 20s, something like that happens and you just don't have any frame of reference for what's going on. So I kind of think about it there's a lot of stuff under each of those things, but I think about it in those 3 major buckets.
It's interesting, Carmen, when you're talking about the friendship and the toolkit and how they were there for you. I'm just curious, introspectively, I know you've always been a good friend to me, but introspectively, does it change the way you will be a friend to others in the future? I mean, because that's on a deep, deep level. And yeah. I'm friends with people, and I try to be there on a deep level. And I've learned to be with certain people because of the experiences. So I was just
completely
curious.
Changed my perspective. I had never actually been completely vulnerable with some of the people in my life, and ever. And so opening up about what I opened up about was something so difficult that I was afraid of rejection. And so I learned from that experience. Actually, one of my closest friends, she and I have been friends since we were 17, since we were freshmen in college. And it's been interesting because she simultaneously is going through something very difficult as well, but on a little bit of a different plane. And so she's been able to open up to me, and I can receive it in a different way than I did before. And I was always a good friend.
Right.
But I think it has completely changed my perspective on how to be a good friend and made me a lot more accepting of what you don't know about somebody's life.
Yeah. I find that when things like that happen, there is that personal growth that makes us either realize that tool, like you're talking about, is so important that we can utilize that in a different way. But the personal growth from something like that is so important.
I'm going to want to bounce back to that, but I first want to hear what Marla's got in her tool.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, my first item and main item, is in an emotional toolkit. And because I think that over the last 5-6 years, I've had a lot of personal challenges that prompted me to figure out what were those tools that were going to help me move through the crisis that I was in. And so if I had to put one thing in my toolkit, or the first thing, it would be friends. And I say friends/family because I do the friends who are family, family who are friends. And it's having that depth of relationships with people where you can be vulnerable and where you can lean on other people in a way that you might have spent the last 40, 50 years being a person who was giving to other people and letting them lean on you and never really wanting to ask for help, until you are throwing up on the floor, passed out, and, you got 6 people standing around you trying to help you. And suddenly you're like, okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for being there. So I think for me, that really core piece is friends. Also a great therapist.
I think that's actually one thing in my toolkit that I wish I had discovered earlier and perhaps deployed earlier, which is a really refined sense of boundaries and a willingness to enforce them.
Amen, sister.
Yeah.
And boundaries were never like a thing 10 years ago. So.
No, I think unconsciously they kind of were. I mean,
yes.
like we all feel when our boundaries are being trodden over. The thought that you would, as a woman especially, that you would push back against that is not something that really ever occurred to me. And I think the other thing too, and I totally own this, it's like a defect in my character, but I definitely was like in this mode for a long time where like I had to have a lot of friends. I had to kind of collect friends. And I don't do that anymore. I don't really need a lot of people. I just need people that I can count on and that I am willing to extend myself for. I think in the past I have extended myself way too much for way too many people that I just don't need to do that. And Marianne and I, we've talked about this. There are some people in particular right now where I just feel like I cannot take on what a friendship with that person is going to entail, so I'm not going to take it on. And you guys know for many years that my husband and I were in a situation where we very much extended ourselves for someone. And I kind of feel like that sort of, I'm done. I'm burnt out. And so it's not just a negative thing, but I'm trying to look at it as a positive thing. That just means that I need to, as I go into this next stage of my life, be a little more conscious of like where I'm putting my energy. I cannot do everything for everybody. Okay. So I am focusing much more narrowly on the people that I care to extend myself for, which, by the way, includes the 3 of you.
Right. It's interesting because every one of us have mentioned friends. Even though it wasn't like in our number one toolbox, it kind of what was for you, and then you circle back to it. And I was talking about positive mindset and boundaries and friendship. That is like such the support. Right. But you're right. You have to curate. You have to be careful. I would say, I know a lot of people, but it is a small group that you can trust. So when something bad really happens.
Really bad, yeah.
You've been able to develop that core. If you have a lot of friends and they're more friendly acquaintances, you don't have that. I think we're at a place now where we are having things in our life that we're looking at differently and retrospectively, and we're kind of having to deal with that. And so it is great to have people. A therapist is good too, I'm sure. One day I'll try that. I know people talk so highly about it, but I kind of have friends that are my therapist and my husband too. Poor Robert.
One thing that's in my toolkit that I will never give up is my little pink happy pill, which one thing from my old doctor that carried through.
Right, that's not Benadryl.
No. It's like kind of a coral colored pink. But anyway, I started taking a anti-anxiety medication about 8 years ago. And at the time I thought I'm just going to do this temporarily to take the edge off because I was under a great deal of stress. And I actually find that, it helps. And I know different people have different feelings about medication. I actually know a lot of friends who have a little bit of medication support. I was always a little, I think it can be useful and helpful. So I wasn't negative about it. It wasn't something I wanted for me. But now that I know how I feel on it versus not being on it,
Right.
I don't want to be stressed out.
Right. And you know what? Medication is a toolkit. Cardiac, seizure. I mean, all of
Thyroid.
Yeah. It's right.
It is
right,
huge.
Right. So you're physical or mental, it doesn't matter. Right. I think
HRT,
that's
baby.
great.
HRT.
Yeah, right. There we go. We could do a whole podcast on it. Right. HRT. Right. It's actually a really good point because, and I don't know, I didn't put anything in here about medication in a toolkit, but when you think about, you could call it a toolkit. You could call it your pantry, your medicine cabinet. I said earlier, it could be arrows in your quiver, right? It doesn't matter. It's what are those tools? What are the things that you go back to help you be you,
Right.
or to be the best version of you? Maybe that's really how we want to call it toolkit, right?
And I don't want to be like totally talking about medical stuff. So I said doctors and I said my little happy pill.
You can move on to other things.
So-
I know there's something about beauty in your toolkit.
There
right?
is, and
Yeah.
and I have to compliment you, Marla, because you were the person who told me to go to Trousseau and get my
Trousseau.
We've all been.
Today. That place makes your boobs look great.
I have a drawer full of it.
Oh my Lord. I went today to get a bra altered because they do
for
that
the
too.
listeners, Trousseau is in Vienna, Virginia, and it's the best place to get fitted for bras, underwear, any of your needs.
Even
go to
swimsuits.
Trousseau.
And by the way, Trousseau, if you want to give us any kickbacks, we're happy to take them.
Actually, they do private events.
They do?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
so we should do it privately.
So we should think about doing a,
my gosh,
podcast
that'd
on
be so
bra
good.
fit.
Ladies, that's lift and separate. I mean, that place is fantastic. That will transform a bosom back into a rack.
I'm telling you. and it just feels good to start like at
I
the
love
beginning.
that you did that.
Well, at the beginning
I
of the
love
day,
that
when you're
place.
getting dressed, the first thing you want to put on is something that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And like having a bra that lifts the girls up.
Yeah.
And, keeps them looking like maybe not like they used to 30 years ago.
Well,
but
at least with clothes on, sort of.
it's a little bit better. But starting with like a good foundation and then building a wardrobe from that, like
Yeah.
curating your wardrobe for things that actually fit you and that look good on you at this age, or more importantly, that you feel look good on you is, I think, kind of an important tool.
And not just that you look good on you, but you feel good when you're wearing it.
Exactly.
That's for me, and that's after years of hosting shopping parties, I realized was the most important thing is how do you feel when you put on that shirt or that dress? So, but that would be in your tool closet.
In my tool closet, yes. And that changes, right? Because I got rid of a ton of clothes that were work clothes that I don't really need anymore because I work at home several days a week and I don't do the kind of work I used to where I need to go to court. I don't need suits. And cleaning that out of my closet and just not filling it, but replacing some of that stuff with things that I will now wear makes me happy.
So that's so funny we were talking about that because just this weekend I have a friend who she's just moving back to the Northeast after spending a couple of years here working on a special 2-year project, and she was having an interview and she didn't really have a lot of clothes here because she was in the process of moving, and so she asked if she could borrow some shoes, and I found a pair of black pumps that what you were talking about, I don't have any idea when the last time was that I wore them. In fact, there was actually a little piece of the heel that had to be glued back together and then it fallen off. But again, it's that she needed to wear something that was going to make her feel good. So again, that pair of shoes was a tool. And I love that idea of our toolkit being whatever it is we need to put in there. I know I made a joke about a suitcase, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't have to be 3 items or 5 items. It doesn't have to be tangible, right? It can be whatever it is, again, to help us be who we are.
Exercise is another one of mine. Positive mindset. Exercise. Like I have to exercise pretty much every day and like 60 to 90 minutes every day. It's just, it's, it's meditation for me too. It is, I just feel like when I exercise, I'm just, it's not spiritual by any means, but I'm taking care of myself. So it is a tool in my toolkit. So if anything else comes up, it's almost preventative. But if I needed surgery tomorrow, I know that I've taken care of my heart, that I can be resilient, that hopefully I would jump back or come back pretty well, and with injuries as well. So it's an interesting toolbox, I think, health and fitness in general, because we look at it as preventative, but yet when something bad happens, it's more than a toolkit. It's your survival mode. I mean, it is how you are going to respond to an emergency. But I just love it anyway. I love to sweat. I love
you and I are weirdos.
I love to kind of have muscle soreness.
Oh, me too.
It is so odd.
Me too.
But yeah, you and I are very much
Love it.
that way. But also the talking about positive mindset, which I talked about as well. I think that this is a tool that enhances that and helps me actually achieve a positive mindset as well. Would be just taking care of myself and pushing myself fitness wise.
Plus all the endorphins.
Well, that's probably a huge part of it. When we talk about the kind of like a meditation piece of it, there is that.
High.
It is a high. It definitely is. So anyway, that would be another tool in my toolbox.
Yeah. So I know you've got some other items in your
do?
practical
big time.
toolkit. Yeah.
My practical toolkit. Well, one of them is like actually a good hairdresser, which goes with the clothing
And the bra.
and the bra. I just think it's really important. Like, I think part of it is embracing that as you age, you're not the same person. Like, I look in the mirror sometimes and I see somebody that I don't entirely recognize. I mean, my hair is gray. I wear glasses. I took them off for this recording. So if anyone's looking, this is how I used to look before I wore glasses. So you're seeing a different person, and that's okay. You have to embrace that. But I want to embrace the best version of that. That makes me feel the most comfortable with myself. So, having my haircut in a way that doesn't make me feel like it's an old lady haircut is something that's important to me. So,
And you always look groomed and stylish, and
Thank you.
You do.
Thank you. I will say for the wedding this weekend, I did my nails and my toenails and my fingernails to match the dress. And I actually at the last minute bought a little handbag that matched the dress.
Cute. I love the dress that you wore.
Thank you. It was very cute. Anyway, those are things that are important to me. I, unlike you guys, am not an exercise person. I'm like more of a sloth.
No, you're not.
But I do think
Walk
about
the
it.
dog.
I walk a lot and I walk the dog. Oh, by the way, that's another thing that in my toolkit I will never be without the dog.
Oh, that's a really good thing in a toolkit.
Yeah. The dog really elevates life in so many ways.
Emotional support.
She's emotional support. She's humor.
Right.
She's a connection between my husband and I, like both in a good way and a bad way. Like he loves sitting there having her. But then it's like, well, why is she leaning on your leg and not mine? And like the last 2 nights, she's had like a little digestive problem. So like who's getting up at 2 a.m. to take her out is a little bit of an issue. But I would never be without a pet.
She's a creator of great stories too. You're a storyteller. So I always like your dog stories.
Every pet we've ever had has been fodder for storytelling, right?
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah. So other things that we didn't mention that are in your
A
toolkit.
sleep mask. I sleep with a sleep mask.
Yes.
Ladies, game changer. It's a
Yes.
game changer because as I get older, I notice that like the thing on the cable box wakes me up.
Yes.
And like the
Oh
little
my God.
sliver of light from the wakes me up. And I'm like, it has made a huge difference, and they're cheap on Amazon.
I need to do that.
They're fantastic. Matt thinks, okay, y'all, I'm going to tell you, my husband thinks it's hilarious. I have curly hair, as some of you know. So one of the things you do with curly hair to keep it curly and from getting it fuzzy is you either sleep on it doesn't really work on a satin pillowcase. So you put it in a ponytail on top of your head, and then you wear like a satin bonnet thing. So I have the satin bonnet, then I have the eye shade.
I want to see that.
Oh, Matt.
Can I bring my camera?
Matt thinks it's hilarious. Then I have the eye shade, and then I wear a retainer for a variety of issues, including grinding and TMJ and all this sort of stuff. So it makes me look like, what's that animal that's the teeth are like this? Like a piranha.
He better say it makes you look sexy.
So luckily,
didn't get
Matt
it.
has a great sense of humor. So he's like, you look fabulous, honey. And I mean, it's hilarious because during the day, I'm extremely vain about my appearance. And to your point, like I care a lot about what I look like, and I've always got my makeup on, and I'm always looking at my outfits, but it takes a lot.
If I had your legs, I'd be vain too. Let me tell you.
More and more work to look like myself. So at night, there is sacrifice. So that tomorrow, we're rocking it.
That is so funny. I feel like there have been so many like one-liners in our podcast tonight that we're going to need to go back and pull out about lift and separate or what it takes to,
Yeah.
Humor is an important thing to have in the toolkit too.
Amen to that.
You
There's
gotta
stuff
laugh.
falling around and down, and parents, and oh, Lord have mercy.
There's
Children.
Yeah.
Children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Humor's a good one.
yeah.
I live with it, so I'm very lucky.
You do.
That way.
Yes, you do actually.
Every day's like a comedy show in my house.
This is true. We played this game. It's part of our family unity thing because my son and his wife, as you guys know, live in California, and my daughter's here in DC. But like we don't get together that often. But every once in a while, we will play an online game called Quiplash. Have you ever heard of Quiplash? Quiplash is
You told me about
Quiplash.
Whiplash?
Quiplash. So it's this online game where you get a series of prompts, and you have to come up with a funny response to the prompt, and then everybody votes on everybody else's prompts.
Okay.
And so we can actually play that long distance. Right. So we do like maybe once a month, we all log in and we play Quiplash together. And I will say my son is the champion Quiplasher because he always comes up with a word or a phrase that is just so freaking hilarious. And then it ends up in everybody's clue because everyone's trying to sort of mimic him. And we just laugh the entire time. It is really wonderful to laugh and get that good positive energy from that.
Another tool.
It's another tool.
Laughter's wonderful.
Yes, laughter, humor, curated closet, exercise, friends,
Sleep masks.
sleep masks. Yes,
Sleep masks
love
and-
that.
and retainers.
Really? Okay. All right.
A couple of other ones that I put, one was remaining curious, I think is really important. And I also think that looking at things that would like growth and development, as well, which comes from curiosity. We do a lot of photography, and that also is a tool for me. It's for you too.
Yes,
I think.
absolutely.
So hobbies in general, I think, can be tools because it takes you to places where you actually feel good about what you're doing and you're growing. Because at this age, we're not on top of our game career-wise, except maybe we're all kind of, well, all of y'all are. I shouldn't say that. But Carmen's like,
Ready to rock and roll.
you're like in kindergarten again. You're going.
Yeah, I'm winding down. She's winding up.
But in general, I'm in the hobby stage. Well, you're in the career making stage.
I think that's really important, the curiosity thing, because Marianne and I had a neighbor who just recently moved away. He moved to, he bought his own condo in a building with his daughter because he's now I think he's 86 now.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic. Like he lived next door to Marianne across the street from me till he was 85. And he was always goals in a lot of ways because he was perfecting baking bread, and he would go through a photography phase. Then he'd go through painting phase. Then he'd go through, he always had all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I just always thought he could just keep himself entertained.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he wrote a bunch
the
of books.
Oh, more
do you know
than
he's
one.
written like 4?
No.
Yeah, he's written
besides
like 4
the one
books.
about mud.
Yes, he's written all
Oh
these
my
different
gosh,
books.
that's so
and I just
interesting.
always thought like that is one of the keys to aging well is, or like one day he came over, we had a little going away party for him, and he came over and one of the neighbors was like, Bob, you look great. Like, you've lost some weight. And he's like, yeah, I stepped on the scale and I couldn't believe the number. So I just lost 25 pounds. Like,
And he walked
Yeah. He
a
just-
lot.
And I always like, I want to, but I think he started that in midlife.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So one toolkit that I kind of was thinking about having as an important one was a self-esteem toolkit.
Oh, girl. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what's in my self-esteem toolkit?
What is?
I don't know. So I just thought maybe we could brainstorm a little bit, because I know we all have a lot of self-esteem, but I also know we've all worked to cultivate that. And also, being where we are in our lives, you've learned how to have more self-esteem and self-confidence. But I wasn't sure what were those things that helped us to get there.
Changing the narrative in your head.
I'm actually going to completely disagree with you.
Okay.
Because I have a lot of confidence, and I recently learned I had no self-esteem, like none.
Okay.
And so that has been a journey for me over the last 9 months to figure out, where do I actually get self-love from and self-acceptance from? I was never lacking in confidence, but they are not the same thing.
So interesting, because as you were saying that, I was thinking, confidence would be a tool in my self-esteem toolkit. Because if I have confidence, I would have more self-esteem. So I think that's really interesting.
I think, ironically, a piece of self-esteem is the willingness to accept the things about you that just aren't great. I mean, if you're always holding yourself up to the standard of perfection,
Right.
then you're always feeling like you're falling short. But if you can look at yourself and say, I didn't do this well, or I need to correct this about myself, or geez, I probably should correct that about myself, but at my age, I'm not going to, and accept yourself as you are, you actually do develop self-esteem, because you know what? We're all human. And a little bit of that is also reflecting that back on others.
Right.
Right. And accepting that on balance, you like someone, but that doesn't mean you like everything about them, because nobody's perfect.
Right.
So,
And I think you can live without self-esteem for a long time. But I think in midlife, if you don't fix that, you're going to have a tough road ahead. And I think you're dead on, Leslie Ann, about what that is and what that looks like. And it's about self-love and self-acceptance and, just coming from a different place. And I lived a long time without those things. And when it hit me in the head, it was bad. But I never suffered with no confidence. I was always very confident that I was good at my job and that I was good at this and I was good at that. But that was a real eye-opener.
Also, when you're talking about like confidence and self-esteem, how you said it, you're good at your job, which would give you confidence, right? It's the intrinsic versus the extrinsic.
100%.
So the intrinsic is really hard. The extrinsic, people are telling you're doing your job good. You look great, you're smart, you're achieving everything. But the way we feel about ourselves is a very different thing when you take away that extrinsic.
It's when your insides don't match your outsides.
Absolutely.
and some of that, going back to what I said about like accepting yourself, and actually something you said earlier about having a positive attitude, I think that actually is really important, but it's what you're positive about. So if your internal dialogue is, I'm the best, I'm really good, there's always going to feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? But if your internal dialogue is, I can handle this, I've got this, I can get through this, really more
positive attitude.
Yeah, but a positive attitude about your capability as a human.
And it's going to turn out well.
Right.
Like I have that. Like, right.
Right. And not some dialogue that sets you up for being perfect.
Right.
Just being capable. I can handle this. I've got this. I think that's actually really important. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They actually do the opposite.
Yeah.
They think they have to be the best.
Right. That's vanity, though.
That's vanity.
More than,
So I think so. Vanity, right? Looking in the mirror, right? And so what I was thinking as I was listening, and again, I'm really happy that you guys are open to figuring out what we need to put, or our listeners need to put in their self-esteem toolkits. But I think that looking in the mirror, in the sense of working with a therapist or with people who see you for who you are and can reflect back on that, I think that's also another piece, another great tool in your self-esteem toolkit, because we sometimes see ourselves, well, we often see ourselves differently than others see us. And to have that type of reflection, I think, is a great self-esteem tool.
I agree. I have to say, I was just having this conversation with somebody about how we see ourselves differently, how someone else sees. And they were asking me, like, how do you realize basically that maybe people see you differently? And I said, well, I have kids. They're perfect. They throw up mirrors in front of me all the time. Mm-hmm. But they've also taught me, like, they don't want advice. You just be a consultant, you know, different things like that. So I think I think that's a good point. And I think that we do need to work on that. And I think that is a good tool.
My kids have taught me that I'm actually a better person than I felt like I was. Right. And that was really,
and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
Or you called me yesterday with something and you were like, do you think I can do this? And I was like, oh my God, yes. Yes, I do.
It's a big thing.
Yes. But I was like, yes, I do.
So, you know, I've been struck during this conversation about, and I actually thought about it in preparing, that so many things that are in our toolkits are actually things or topics that we've talked about in different seasons and different episodes. And so I love the fact that we can share with our listeners and with each other these different tools, these different topics, and really encourage people to let us know what is in their toolkit, what we might have missed that might be helpful for others. And there are probably some things that we all didn't get a chance to talk about that we might just pop on the website for some other items as people begin to put together their toolkits or add different things to their toolkits. So such a great conversation. Couldn't think of anybody I would rather have this with. And for our listeners, again, go online at AmericanMidsters.com and let us know what's in your toolkit.